your training should set up a framework and a foundation to give you the physical freedom that you can pursue any athletic endeavor you want for the rest of your life.
Hello and welcome to the Breaking Muscle Podcast, where we take you inside the minds of some of the biggest names in the fitness industry. I'm Pete Hitzeman, your co-host and managing editor of BreakingMuscle.com, and joining me for this podcast is Shane Trotter, one of our leading contributors. Today we're bringing you a very special episode with none other than Max Shank, creator of the 5-Minute Flow and author of Ultimate Athleticism, The Simple Shoulder Solution, and several other books. Max has quickly become one of the leading minds in all of fitness, and his work and input is found far and wide in health and fitness media. We take a deep dive with Max into his evolution from 19-year-old personal trainer to internationally recognized movement authority. We'll discuss the importance of daily movement, the basic elements of habit formation, the difference between getting strong and becoming athletic, and why you should invest your calories, not just burn them. We'll also get into what it'll take to move the culture toward fitness being the norm rather than just something us freaks do. I think you'll enjoy this one.
I'm very excited today to have Max Shank on. Max is I was just telling him, Max's book was a big influence in actually the creation of this series of interviews. If you haven't read Ultimate Athleticism, my copy's all bent up. I have a backpack that's my world at all times. It's got my laptop, my planner, and my Ultimate Athleticism copy, just because I love to reference it all the time. So it was one of a few books I read all in a short span of time that really led to this podcast. And so I'm really excited to have Max on today. Thanks for being here, Max.
Oh man, I can't even imagine a nicer thing to say to somebody. That is so freaking cool. Thanks for having me on. I'm just really happy to be here. That's great.
Well, we will jump right in. The first kind of section is it's a short getting to know you section. The challenge is that it is one-word answers only. So we're going to fly through this. Hopefully it gives the listener just kind of an idea who you are briefly, and we'll get into some depth later, all right?
All right.
Cool. So the first, one-word answers only, steak or salmon?
Salmon, but raw.
1-rep max or VO2 max?
Probably in the middle.
Gymnastics or martial arts? And that's probably really hard for you.
It's like choosing which of my children to kill. I guess martial arts with that analogy.
Sure. Bill Belichick or Pete Carroll?
Bill Belichick, but only because my general manager, Mike, loves the Patriots.
The one thing, not a person, you could not live without?
Oh, shit. My health, I guess. I think like any physical object, and I know this kind of ruins the whole rapid fire one-word answer thing. I feel like any one physical object could probably be learned to live without, you know?
No doubt. Your favorite television show or movie?
Fifth Element.
Oh, right on. You're about to do something awesome. What song do you play?
Total silence. No song.
Oh, okay. No song. Just mindful.
Silence.
Right,
just
I like it.
Silence. Yeah.
The greatest invention of the last 100 years is?
For better and worse, probably the cell phone.
Yeah. For better and worse is right.
It's just like you said, you have extremely intelligent people who are highly motivated and highly compensated to make every type of media as engaging and stimulating as possible. People don't design video games so you play them for 4 minutes.
Sure.
Some of the video games are, $60 million budgets, it's like basically Avatar when they're designing these video games. And a big percentage of that is geared to make you play longer, so you're more invested into it. It makes perfect sense. It's really hard to combat. That's why it's so important to include as much. I guess everything is natural technically, but I think being outside and moving your body is really important for getting back to some of that.
Yeah, no doubt. It's the same way with the food companies. They're in the business of getting you to eat more, they're going to make it more addictive.
Of course.
What's the one place everyone should visit?
Oof. I don't even really have a good answer for that, actually. I'll tell you why I don't have a good answer for that, and it will tell you a little bit something about myself.
Okay.
This year I decided to eliminate the word should from my vocabulary.
Right on.
So
Okay.
I try not to worry about anything I should do or focus on anything I should do. And by that same token, I don't care about what anyone else should do. You know? It really is a nice way to live, actually. And the funny thing is, I really, what I want to do most is help people move better, but I don't force it on anybody. I just kind of explain, like, hey, if you do this, then you'll get this. Like, if you move your joints around every day and you learn how to use your core and have some, like, body awareness and coordination, you will feel good. You'll be able to perform at a higher level. But I don't say that anyone should do anything, because you can spend your whole life trying to convince people of stuff, and it just will drive you nuts.
What a natural way to live, to get back to what you're saying. to not have shoulds on you all day.
Let everyone else do their thing. You do your thing. It works out really great.
Sure. Well, so much of what you think other people should do, well, that's just, some conditioned thought process that, probably has no real relevance to anything other than you're conditioned to think it's normal.
Exactly. Everything is based on what we predict should happen, actually, to use the word should there.
Yeah, and expectations are a great way to be a little less happy. So
exactly. Right.
Yeah. All right. Most our problems would be solved if only blank was the dictator, and this can be a fictional character.
I would say me, if I was the dictator.
Yeah. Right. I can't believe I haven't got that one yet. That's
I was going to say, that's the first honest answer we've had in this series so far. I really started to say me, and I realized I probably shouldn't say that in front of like 600 people. So.
Oh my God! I absolutely think it's me. How could you even live with yourself if you don't think you could do the best job?
That's right. Yes. It's like my wife. My wife would tell me all the time.
Simple.
Yeah, if people just thought like me, the world would make a lot more sense.
Exactly. How can you not think that?
I love it. All right. What one word best describes you?
I don't really know. That's a really tough one. Probably minimalism at this point, although that seems like such a bad way to sum yourself up as like a small amount of something. But I think that's basically it. It's like I'm just pretty happy with not a lot of stuff. So minimalism, yeah, that's great.
Right on. Okay, we're going to jump into questions of depth, all right? So these will be as broad, as deep as we want to go. We can take off in the tangents and really just see whatever happens, all right? So, first one, you got 1 hour of sleep. Do you train anyway or call it and train another day?
It depends on what you mean by train. Training, to me, typically has a more rigid connotation than just moving. So if I get 1 hour of sleep, I probably won't train, but I'll always move. I arrived in Taiwan recently to teach a course, and my flight got in at midnight, so I got back to the hotel at like 1 a.m. But I had done some moving around at the airport and on the plane. But before I went to sleep, even though I had to work the next day at 7, I still moved around for like 20 minutes. So I did some push-ups, some squats, some mobility flow type of stuff on the wall and that sort of thing. So I wouldn't necessarily call that a training session, but I definitely wouldn't go a day without whatever level of movement my nervous system could handle, because I think it's really important to move every day. So even if you only slept for an hour, if you're going to be awake for 23 hours, some of that should for sure be movement, but it wouldn't be a good time to hit it really hard.
That's a really good point. So if you're only sleeping 1 hour, that means you have 23 hours awake. It would be a bad idea to just be still or seated, especially for 23 hours.
Yeah, exactly. What better way to recover than from sitting than more sitting?
Sure. Yeah, and like you said, kind of okay. Well, I'm not going to be intense, but it might be, in my experience, energy giving to do some low grade movement. there's the Ivan Ivanov quote: exercise should give you more than it takes out of you.
Absolutely.
That effect.
Right, and that's the whole. That really depends so much on a person's idea of what training really means, because for a very long time, not in the very beginning of my career, but for a very long time, I've always been of the mind that you should feel energized after a training session. You should feel better than when you first started the training session. This whole self-punishment thing, like punishing yourself with exercise for how many calories you ingest or for how little you move throughout the rest of the day, is really not a good line of thinking. You don't want your psyche to be communicating movement as punishment, certainly, because whatever you get punished with, you're going to want to look to avoid that as much as possible. So you don't want it to be something that you associate with that consequence or punishment.
Yeah, no doubt. Or you'll avoid it, and it could never become a habit. That's not how habits are. Punishment leads you. It makes things not a habit.
Well, and there's another way to think of it too. Like, if you look at habit formation itself, it doesn't have to be something that you're just automatically doing every day. It can also just be making sure you engage in something that requires no willpower.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I've finally built the habit of going wakeboarding. Like, you don't really have to build a habit of going wakeboarding. Wakeboarding is just really fun if you find something you like.
Yeah.
So I think the trick is to find stuff that you like, and then make sure that your training just allows you to do that safely.
Sure. Which if people aren't familiar with your ultimate athleticism, there's stuff online you can get a general idea. That's kind of the idea. It's more play. It's not prescribed set and reps. The prescriptions are blocks of time, but it's a much more qualitative approach. You're not punching the clock. You're not going through a checklist.
Right.
You're kind of playing with these movements, discovering them. There's the regression, progression, and
right.
and it can scale to the day. But it's kind of exploring this stuff. Wouldn't it be neat to be able to have your body do these cool things?
Exactly, and I think it's important to have some worthwhile goals that are bigger than just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
the Ultimate Athleticism program is kind of like organized chaos, because there are so many different variations on upper pushing movements that you can do that essentially are viable substitutes. Like, you don't necessarily need to just military press. You don't need to just do handstand push-ups. You don't need to just bottom-up press. You don't need to do Hindu. Like, there are so many things that could easily substitute for one another.
Sure.
That over the long term, if you understand how to put those together in something of a framework, then you have the freedom to modify it a little bit to better suit your needs and your personal preference as well.
Sure. And to go to what you said as far as motivation and goals, especially after after your athletic career, and I know it's a program that's actually would make you much more athletic. It's Ultimate Athleticism, but especially for most people at 22, they're not competing like they were at least before.
Right.
At a certain point, if you just love to train, but you're going to get bored with, hey, I squat hard, I bench hard, I deadlift hard. The same.
Yeah, you're going to burn out.
To have, when I discovered body weight, some of the body weight and kettlebell stuff, it was a whole new world. You're learning skills, and to take it back to skill acquisition made it way more rewarding. And the goals were, you didn't even have to sit down and make them; they were self-evident. I want to be able to do this movement. I want to be able to work to the next progression, which is a lot more rewarding in my experience, anyway.
And I think in a certain sense, it's also safe to at least include some exercises where, your ability to maneuver your body levers and manipulate leverage is really limited by what your strength is. So you can't really get into a lot of positions that would injure you the same as if you got under a barbell. Now, obviously, I think that a good blend of weighted exercises and unweighted exercises is optimal. But there's certainly an advantage to having at least a portion of your training be self-limiting in the sense that you can't really do too much in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And that's not across the board, obviously, but there are a lot of movements that lend themselves to being a little bit more skill progressive than load progressive.
Yeah. And it's more human probably too. As far as for longevity, it's probably going to help you age better. I would imagine.
Certainly, and certainly just balancing out the movement patterns. The simple pushing and pulling in the upper body, pushing, pulling in the lower body, core exercises, twisting, and then making sure you can do all of those one limb at a time. Just being able to do one limb at a time or unilateral exercises and being able to prevent rotation is something that a lot of lifters really struggle with because they kind of stay in that same plane. Everything's okay, two leg deadlift, 2-arm bench press. Like everything is just in this straight ahead plane, and you get people who are very athletic in that one line, and then you start trying to get them to rotate or move laterally, and there's nothing there. And my background was from playing soccer, so all we cared about was lateral movement and rotational power and straightaway speed and things like that. So then when I got into lifting, I noticed there was like a pretty significant gap in terms of athleticism. People who were doing a lot of lifting in the gyms, I fast forward now, I'm a personal trainer. I've played soccer at all these years. And personal training is just all in this one plane, and it has the normal stuff has almost no carryover to athleticism other than providing you more general strength. But there are movements that you can do that will have a higher carryover to overall athleticism, and that's how you can kind of achieve more things by focusing on fewer things. So that's kind of like the minimalism component to it too, right? If you can do these gymnastics and handstand variations, it's very easy for you to be able to do a military press, but it doesn't really work the other way.
Yes, I like that. That's a really good point. Let's move to the next one. Is there one life event that most shaped your life trajectory, and will you share?
One specific event?
One specific life event that sticks out that most shaped your life trajectory.
Probably not. I would say the thing that shaped my life trajectory the most was getting my first job and then continuing to work from a young age all the way through. I feel like that gave me a huge, massive advantage in the world. I've had a job since I was 12 years old, and I feel like, by the time I was done with school, and I don't mean I finished, I mean I was done with school. I was like, see you later, school. Just to clarify. I had already had like 10 years of work experience. So it was I didn't feel quite so lost as a young adult because I was like, I've been working for 10 years already. Where I see and saw a lot of my peers, finish school at either 22 or 26, depending if they got like a graduate degree or something like that, and go out into the world like Bambi, having no idea how to balance a budget or how like the world actually works. So I think getting an early start made a huge difference. And then I know this is like a horrible answer to the question, but getting an early start made a huge difference. And then also just finding what I love to do relatively early. I had no idea when I was in college what I wanted to do. And then, I got a job as a personal trainer just off of Craigslist. Literally, the only reason I got the job was because I wore a tie. I had no certifications. I had zero experience. I had like nothing to offer, except I was like, well, I mean, I'll do the job and I'll do the best I can, and I've been working for a long time, so like it should work. And so I just, as soon as I started learning more about it, I found myself spending less and less time focusing on the stuff that I needed to actually do for school, and more time using any extra money that I had to go to courses on exercise and fitness marketing and, then, before I knew what happened, I was, 20 years old, 21 years old, opening my gym, and
wow.
so that's the thing, is I got an early start. So I'm 29 now, but I've been in the industry for over 10 years.
Sure.
And I think anybody can be really good at something if they really love it. You know what I mean? Like, it just makes it easy. Like, if you like to do it, it's kind of like what we were talking about with habits and willpower before. Like, if you find something really fun you like to do, you'll want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the reason that the United States gymnastics team, women's team, wins more medals than China, even though China has more people and a more sophisticated selection process and higher rewards for the athletes. Mm-hmm. So even though their method of screening for athletes is better and selecting athletes is better, the incentive structures are better. The reason we win
there's
more medals,
incentive than being on Dancing with the Stars?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's like a financial incentive if you're Chinese and you can get like one of these medals, like a real financial incentive. I think in the U.S., like a gold medal is worth, don't quote me, but I think it's between like $8,000 and $15,000.
And they tax you on it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and now, so if you amortize that over the decade that it took you to get skilled enough to do that, and then you subtract everything you spent in coaching, you're probably only at like a net negative $250,000. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
So what's on your backstory for a second? Starting out at 19, I think is really interesting because you were the guy that we in the fitness media community spend a lot of time telling people not to go see, right?
Right.
You were the guy with no knowledge.
Absolutely.
With a tie. I've never trained with somebody with a tie. So what does 29-year-old Max Shank tell 19-year-old Max Shank about getting into the business now?
I would have some very choice words for his marketing techniques.
Okay.
Are essentially non-existent. 19-year-old Max was a coward when it came to marketing. He was afraid to ask for the sale because he believed, and this is probably the longest I've ever talked in the third person before, but 19-year-old Max strongly believed that he probably didn't deserve to get paid because he liked doing this so much.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was obviously a big mistake, but then 19-year-old Max also found out that people don't value something as much if they don't pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So he eventually learned that, but he had a lot of choice lessons. The other thing 19-year-old Max wasn't great with was programming. The first gym I worked at, we had a pretty strict format that included a lot of treadmill walking in between, bicep and tricep exercises, and then treadmill walking between leg curl and leg extension exercises. So it was a pretty, it was certainly a safe training program, but it wasn't, in my opinion, a particularly effective one.
I can't imagine why you're not still doing that. It sounds like so much fun.
I gotta say, it's extremely fun to watch.
Right up there
also,
with wakeboarding, right?
Yeah, exactly. Watching someone walk on the treadmill is really the highest form of coaching, I think. It's right up there with texting while your client foam rolls.
Oh.
No, but I mean, I obviously have changed my techniques a lot over the years. It kind of started out with a standard bodybuilding routine where it was like an entire day for biceps and an entire day for triceps, and one body part got like 50 different exercises.
What 18-year-old didn't start there?
Like that.
Yeah.
And that actually worked okay. Like I put some muscle on because I hadn't really done any lifting before. But then when I started doing CrossFit, I actually started to get strong. And really the reason was because I had never done a deadlift before. I had never really thought about like doing lots of pull-ups and push-ups, honestly. I had done a ton of hill sprints as a youth, but I had never really gotten onto the push-up bandwagon. So, basically I went through CrossFit. I got quite a bit stronger. Both my knees and elbows started to hurt. My back started to hurt a little bit. Now, in the defense of what I was doing, I was also just really going balls to the wall and like trying to do everything as fast as possible. So I would imagine I wasn't doing the perfect technique either. But I would also argue that it's almost impossible to do the perfect technique on a technical exercise at high levels of fatigue.
Yeah.
So that's where you kind of have to separate it from training and sport. I was using it for training, which wasn't a good option for me with my history at the time, I guess.
Sure.
Then I moved into just doing Olympic lifting and started doing some corrective work and flowed into kettlebells and started, getting more like athletic and functional again. And I've actually talked to a lot of friends of mine who have gone through the similar path where they eventually end back up where like, oh yeah, we need to be able to run multi-directionally and we need to be able to jump and land softly, and maybe it would be a good idea to be able to walk on a balance beam. And hang from a pull-up bar and do the monkey bars and things like that. It's funny how, in a lot of ways, in-shape people are much more athletic, but in some ways they're much less athletic. The average lifter can put up a lot more weight on the normal lifts, but when you ask them to do a monkey bar type of thing and just traverse monkey bars and hang from one arm, that strength that most 4-year-old girls have is essentially gone.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm the first one to admit there are tons of 10-year-old gymnast girls who are far stronger than me pound for pound.
Sure.
But I feel like we should at least be able to keep up with the average 5-year-old child.
That's a good goal. Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like what you're alluding to, your friends, a lot of people that I've seen, as they get further along in working in fitness, they want to be more human. They want to be a more,
totally.
That's kind of, and it's makes sense that there'd be something natural inside of us pulling us in that direction,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like we were talking about before, how your brain, deep in the recesses of your reptilian brain, there are all these benefits to moving around. There are these reward systems. You're supposed to move around. You're supposed to climb on stuff and grab things and move around and crawl around on the floor and all that stuff.
Sure. And experiment with how you do things. And
yeah, exactly. It's good for your brain. Just the same way that you do a crossword, you should probably do the same thing with your ability to move your joints around. Eventually more and more complex things. I really think there's no excuse. If someone wants to improve their coordination, being able to juggle is not a difficult task. It just requires a little bit of energy put into it. You can basically teach anybody how to juggle at any age, 60, 70 plus, whatever, with just a couple minutes a day for a few weeks. It's amazing. So being able to do more stuff like that, I think, gives you a greater movement vocabulary. So then it gives you more options as to what you can do for fun activities.
Yeah.
And that's my big thing right now is your training should set up a framework and a foundation to give you the physical freedom that you can pursue any athletic endeavor you want for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that's the big secret, right? So you don't necessarily have to love training in the gym. You just have to figure out what these movements are that keep you strong and resilient and healthy and more athletic and more capable. So then you can go do whatever fun thing you like. For someone it's going to be stand-up paddleboarding. For another person it's going to be kickboxing and everything in between that. So you just want to prepare yourself to at least have the options.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And what a great reminder, just as a person, I think, find things that are new to you, that challenge you in a new way, and remember what it is to struggle. I think it's very common for people to hit 26, 27, they're having kids or whatever it is, or coaching, and they forget what it's like to be that newbie, that Bambi, learning something new, and it doesn't make any sense, or my body's not working that way. I think it's a really good experience just for empathy for other people.
Oh man, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we should all at least climb one metaphorical mountain every day. There needs to be some kind of struggle. If you don't have struggle, and I think that's actually why we're probably one of the most heavily medicated societies in the world, is we've shied away from struggle, any kind of struggle, mental struggle, emotional struggle, physical struggle. We've shied away from any type of struggle at the expense of any kind of toughness or resilience. There really is supposed to be something special about completing a task, and it's like, the longer the climb, the sweeter the peak, right?
Yeah.
So if the best you can string together is, I don't know, 3 minutes to complete a Sudoku, you're probably not going to have like a huge level of like fulfilling achievements.
Sure.
But if you've been working on like a handstand for 1 year, and now you can like hold a rock solid handstand, you're like, wow, I actually achieved something.
Yeah.
And it can work the same way with like a 300-pound or a 400-pound or 500-pound deadlift for the right person. So I think it's important, like you said, very rightfully, to have some sort of struggle. And I think that not having struggles that you overcome on a at least semi-regular basis is definitely a detriment to us as human beings.
Yeah. There was a time in my life in college I got anxiety. And it would have been, going to, you said medication, it would have been very easy. But that's what led me to meditation. And it kind of helped itself, and what a great opportunity. So many times that we look for the quick fix, they're all just opportunities for growth.
Right.
We'll jump forward. You have one regret. What is it and why?
That's some deep stuff, man.
Not learning how to juggle. I'm writing mine.
I would say the biggest regret I have is kind of weird. I regret holding the grudges that I used to hold for as long as I did. I think probably one of my better talents is not holding a grudge. And if I could have gotten to this point sooner, I think that would have probably been more constructive. But the fact that I'm here is still, at least now, is pretty good. Better late than never.
Sure, those grudges don't do anything to them. The old cliche, but they're toxic to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. The one I like about holding a grudge a lot is holding a grudge is like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, that's right.
I always like that one.
All right. What is the one training or nutrition myth you'd eliminate from the face of the earth forevermore?
That burning calories should be the chief aim of exercise.
Yes. You have a great article. I'm glad you brought that up. I just loved it. I have it bookmarked, and I've read it multiple times. The burning calories and wasting time, which is so much more than just strength and conditioning, fitness. It's life. That's just it's philosophy at its best, I think.
Well, and just to clarify, it's burning calories and killing time, which is what people say, right? They're like, oh, I was just killing time. And every time I hear that, and actually every time I hear like burning calories, like it makes me go insane. Like I understand I'm not a normal human being, but like it drives me absolutely
way overrated,
up the wall. It drives me absolutely up the wall that you've got like a limited amount of time in a day. So time keeps on rolling whether you actively kill it or not, right?
Sure.
So, and then from like the burning calories standpoint is like, why would you not want to invest some calories?
Yeah.
Or even spend some calories. Like I mean, investing the calories would really be the ideal situation. You could invest them into, being better at something in the future because, calories are still energy, just the same way that time is kind of like just energy. How much time you put towards something, how much energy you dedicate towards something. But those two sayings drive me absolutely bananas. It just makes me want to like murder people for continuing that nonsense that like, oh, you should choose this workout based on how many calories you burn. And I'm like, listen, you can actually burn a lot of calories or utilize a lot of calories dancing. Like, I mean, and I bet there are a lot of people who would rather dance than do some, nonsense cardio class with really no other point than burning calories and jacking up the heart rate. So I think that's the main thing that really aggravates me in terms of fitness myths is like this whole thing about like burning calories and how it relates to the philosophical problem of people who want to kill time.
What really changed my perspective on burning calories was getting into endurance racing. And all of a sudden calories become something very precious to you
Precious.
4 or 6
Yes.
hours into an event. And you're like, I need whatever your calories are. My food standards are out the window. Give me that slice of pizza, or
Exactly. You need the calories. You need to invest them into your running abilities.
Well, hell,
You know,
go to a third world country and talk to me about burning calories. Like they are literally rioting over calories in Venezuela right now. So I think you have to have a really messed up state of mind to have your number one objective in your non-working hours to be just mindlessly slaving away to burn calories.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to the whole punishment thing too, right? Like you're punishing yourself for the calories that you ate. I mean, like, talk about having a very fucked up relationship with food and exercise.
Well,
that's 75% of America, isn't it? I mean, everybody go to LA Fitness right now and look through the window. Don't go in because they'll attack you. But look through the window and look at the number of people who look so happy at what they're doing. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Well, and that's something that I find myself saying quite regularly is, people are like, oh, well, what's the best exercise? I'm like, I don't know, the one that you like. Like, if you find one that you like, and that's kind of when I talk program design with people, I always put everything into the perspective of patterns. So then they can decide out of that pattern what they like the best or what's best for them. So, like, for example, you can do reverse lunges as a single leg lower body pushing exercise, right? Or you can do airborne lunges, or you can do lateral lunges, or you can do sled pushes, or you can do deficit lunges, you can do forward lunges, you can do cross behind lunge. Like, you can do all these different lunge variations, but they all still generally stay in that same category of lower push, single leg exercise. So then you can group those all together and figure out what makes your body feel the best, or simply what you enjoy doing the most. And there are so many different variants on that. Like, the bench press really isn't the only way to strengthen this pattern. There are different crawling and hand balancing variations and L-sit handstands and all these different movements that are perfectly viable substitutes that might be a little more fun. They might be a little bit more mentally engaging. They might keep someone bought in to the idea of building skills and improving overall movement quality and athleticism rather than, causing tissue damage just to build muscle and burning calories just for the sake of burning calories to punish you for whatever you ate before. So I think, having those worthwhile mountains to climb, to borrow what we were saying earlier, is huge.
Yeah, no doubt. Eat a cookie is another thing you've said a lot of times. Nutrition should be sustainable. Just like this fitness should be what you like, you should learn to like a natural foods, but also have that flexibility, like you have the flexibility in your programming to go here. Have that flexibility to enjoy something, but not let it control you.
I mean, have you ever had a blueberry? They're delicious.
Yeah, exactly. And yet we lump them completely. It's almost like we don't let ourselves enjoy that as much. Like, that blueberry was phenomenal, but it was good for me still. So
you can't have blueberries anyway. They're full of carbs.
Yeah. People do this. I see this on my Facebook all the time. People are like, I'm going to start eating healthy. You've inspired me. I'm gonna clean up my diet. So I'm going to start drinking kale smoothies every day. I'm like, why would you do that to yourself? There are so many delicious things to put in your mouth that are aren't bad for you. You're going straight to kale smoothies. Okay.
Right. Well, it's like, and you can't fault someone for trying to make a big change, but that usually isn't the best option, right?
Right.
It would be much better if they were like, you know what, I'm only going to have like 7 Coca-Colas today instead of 12. Like, those baby steps typically add up to more than, trying to go like full 180 the other direction. It's really tough that way.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. What one habit or ritual do you most credit with success in life, and why?
Gosh. It's going to sound like a plug, but getting my morning routine dialed in and built around the 5-minute flow concept, which is the daily movement practice, is a really strong anchor for other habits that I want. So really, it's just getting a morning routine with a strong enough anchor. And once you study habit formation a little bit, you realize that any habit that you want to stick with, you want to have a trigger and you want to have a reward for it. So you want to have something that like kind of puts it in a certain block,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that upon waking up, because you spent the whole evening not moving, you want to do like a daily warm-up, warm up your brain, warm up your body, that kind of thing. So I think having the daily movement and breathing practice as an anchor, along with music, actually, has been a total game changer. And then I think just back to our last question about, you said something about adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to touch on that real quick, because I think adaptability is the chief characteristic of success in anything.
Mm-hmm.
In business, especially with how fast the world's changing right now. If you look at, Silicon Valley, like we were talking before,
Mm-hmm.
the world's changing really fast. So the only way to succeed at anything is to be adaptable. The only way to succeed with exercise is to have that same flexibility to adapt, right? You don't want to be, thrown into this box where you have to do this specific thing at this specific weight for this specific amount of repetitions for this specific amount of sets, from an exercise standpoint. Similarly, you don't want to just keep doing the same thing in business over and over without being open to the fact that, oh, you know what, that actually sucks. This isn't helping me at all. And you can take it from me. I've had my gym now for 8 years. There are some pretty hard conversations you have to have with yourself when you're like, shit, this is not working at all. I've invested a lot of energy and time and probably also money into this. It's going to hurt like hell to pull the plug and lose all that work that I'd put into it, but it's just not working. So you have to have that flexibility to adapt if you want to be successful in absolutely anything.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. I've heard many businessmen say also that whatever got them to where they were established, well, that same pattern, if they just continued that, was going to be their demise. Things change too quick.
Yeah, it won't actually keep you there.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough. Yeah, very strange.
Yeah. And to go back to we're jumping now, but to go back to your habit question too, which I loved, the 5-minute flow, writing for Breaking Muscle is Chris Holder. I don't know if he's turned that into he put an article out on the Cal Poly flow, which I've adapted and I use with my athletes, and but I do it myself first thing in the morning.
That's great.
And like you said, my body's a little crankier in the morning. But
of course.
When you set that habit, that's the hardest thing is to get started. You set that. But once I get through that in the morning, I want to keep moving.
Exactly.
Had I not done it, who knows when I would have got moving. But because that's the first thing I do every morning, it lends itself into a whole process I go through every morning. But it lends itself to an active day.
Yeah, it builds momentum for you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the hardest part is always overcoming the inertia. Some people, and when I say some people, I mean formerly and sometimes currently myself, get so inundated with just getting started with something. So being able to overcome that inertia and break from 0 to even 0.1 of anything is always the hardest part. And
start.
That once again it requires energy. And sometimes I find doing something as simple as starting a timer is an easier way to overcome the inertia. Like, okay, time starts right now. Like sometimes you just need to do something, like get it started. And then, like you said, like once you have that momentum, it makes it easier to climb whatever mountains you're going to climb throughout that day. And it certainly makes the day more fulfilling and full of achievement.
Oh, there's no doubt. No one's ever regretted a workout. Unless I did something really stupid and got hurt, maybe.
Yeah, I think I've regretted. I've definitely regretted workouts, but it's always been because of something dumb I was doing. Like, trying to throw a heavy back squat session in 2 days before a half marathon. Just dumb. Like I know better.
Right. And
I didn't regret the workout while I was doing it, but I certainly regretted it 8 miles into a race or something like that. So.
Sure.
Yeah. We've all done dumb stuff like that. Like I remember flying to Europe and then that next morning doing a heavy deadlift workout, and I'm like, you know what, that was really probably not my smartest decision. Like maybe give yourself a couple days before heavy shit when you do transatlantic voyages.
So you travel a whole bunch. How do you
Yeah,
I mean, you're
I was
also
wondering that.
somewhere. How do you work that into your own training? Like, you're obviously doing challenging things all the time. So it's not
This
like you
isn't
can
gonna.
give yourself 2 days of
It's
warm up when you're only going to be in country for 4 days.
it's true. It's not even really gonna sound that helpful. Like I just often will not want to do anything, but then I
Mhm.
just still do it. That's
Okay.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
because especially like I mean, I'll teach a course all day long, and I'm weird. Usually I will skip breakfast and lunch when I teach. Like occasionally I'll eat while I teach, but I find that if I eat something, I don't really stay as sharp. So I'll
hmm
go straight through the whole day, taking almost no breaks. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, what do I want to do now? Am I like going to rush to dinner and eat some food? Or am I going to stick around and at least do a half hour of some kind of lifting, even if that's something very easy? And those easy workouts are really the fabric that hold the tough workouts together, I think.
yeah.
So being able to do like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to, throw on the occlusion bands and do 3 sets of 30 push-ups or something like that and some rows
hmm
and maybe jump around a little bit and do some like leg stuff. Um, or if I'm just gonna flow for like 15 minutes. But you got
hmm
to do something. And when you're feeling like garbage, just do things where it's really hard to mess yourself up, and then get after it. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't think it's wrong. In fact, I think it's a good idea to sometimes do really challenging high skill movements like L sit to handstand, but then also hammer strength incline bench press machine
Sure.
is really fun and nice sometimes. Like that just
Yeah.
feels good. Like
Sure.
you don't have to worry about dropping a weight. I mean, it's very like monotask. Like you don't really
hmm
have to focus on too much. Just grab, push.
Sure.
And I think there's value to that too. Just doing
Sure.
like a nice easy bodybuilding session where you get a
Sure.
get a stick pump and you don't really play around with any weights that are too heavy, so you don't give yourself a chance to mess yourself up.
I think there's a
Sure.
lot of
I mean,
mileage in that easy workout fabric holding the rest of your
yeah.
workouts together thing. That in the CrossFit circles that I'm in, the most impossible thing for me to convince people of, and really it's the intermediate CrossFitter, right? The 2 year guy who's been in the gym, they want to crush themselves every single time they walk in the door, and then they wonder why they're hurt and they're dinged up all the time and they're not making progress and stuff. And I'm like, you've got to back off sometimes.
Right.
You cannot bury yourself 6 days a week and expect to make continuous progress. It's
Well, that
never
would
going to
be
happen.
like, yeah, that would be like a shot putter throwing as hard as possible 7 days a week, or a
Right.
sprinter
Sure.
sprinting 10 hundreds at max effort every day. Like, I mean, it's
Oh,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Like, you just,
Yeah.
and the more elite you get, the less time you can spend at your maximum capacity. Like, look at,
Sure.
fighters at the top level. You do like a championship boxing match. They don't want you to do anything afterward for quite some time because you will be in such like a, provided it's like a good fight, like a fragile state for a long time.
Sure. Well, the neural output for an Olympic sprinter is so much higher than,
Exactly.
I mean, you have to be a lot more sparing in your max outputs.
Well,
Um,
and you should definitely do stuff like that. You should definitely do power work, and you should definitely do power endurance work. But, to your point, like you can't be going balls to the wall all the time. You just can't do it.
sure. I love what you said too on start is the big thing. When I don't want to,
Yeah.
I start, and that I think that goes all the way back to hey, you started working when you were 12, and a big part of what made you successful was probably early learning the skill of delayed gratification. I've written a few
Yeah.
times about the Stanford marshmallow test. It's
Yeah.
everything.
Same here.
It's a
Absolutely.
skill.
I love that one.
Learning to say, I'm going to go, or I can delay what I want for another second.
It allows you to do what's best for the long term instead of just thinking about the short term. And financial management is actually one of the easiest ways to see this in action. We have like record levels of debt across the board,
Mhm.
not only as a country but also as individuals. Just in the fitness industry alone, you have a lot of people operating with their entire year's salary in credit card debt. And the reason for this, of course, is a lack of delayed gratification, the
Yeah.
ability to prioritize the things you need or the things you desire versus the things you just want. And the short-term wants, if you keep rewarding those short-term wants, whether it's like, oh, I'll just get a Starbucks every day, I'll just go out drinking for $100 every weekend, whatever, and then still carrying debt, it's because you can't properly attach values to each of those things. You know, there's a much more profound impact in carrying a massive amount of credit card debt over the long term than there is in enjoying an alcoholic beverage every weekend. Like, you can still, you can sacrifice one of those in order to not be a net negative, you know? That wasn't much of a tangent, right?
No, totally.
Where do we even get to?
I could have really easily segued into 401k management there. You could have gone right into it.
Well, just drop me off and bring what's his name? Dave Ramsey on.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Gordon Ramsay. That's the wrong Ramsey.
Gordon Ramsay, yelling at you in the kitchen about saving for retirement.
Yeah. All right. What one quote should everyone know and remind themselves of daily?
People suffer far more in their own mind than in reality.
Yes. Love it.
Yeah,
Love
I
it.
think that's a good one. Yeah, there are a lot of good ones, but that one's pretty good.
Yeah, I thought you would go Bruce Lee. That's awesome.
Bruce Lee seems like the obvious response, and I've quoted him like so many times in my books that I wanted to branch out a little bit. And I think actually, you know, based on what I see, and I guess my quote is really more directed at what I see people currently struggling with. So I think, you know, there's a lot of anxiety and paralysis by analysis. So I think that's probably like the first order of business is to like get through that idea that, you know, most people, you know, suffer 1,000 deaths before they even feel the knife, so to speak.
Sure. The idea of the two arrows, or you get hit by the first arrow of learning about something and the second arrow of dwelling about that thing that's going to happen, or there's a lot of that. The idea that I find powerful, though, is to remind myself sometimes that this is literally the most charmed existence that I'm living in, that any human, 99.999% of human history couldn't dream of this. The Greek gods 2,000 years ago weren't thought to live lives as extraordinary as ours. Royalty 100 years ago couldn't have imagined life could be as comfortable as we live it now.
And I could not be more with you. I could not be more with you on that.
I mean, you can have Netflix. You can control the entire NFL. I wrote about this the other day. It's amazing. The whole access to all the information ever is right there in your palm.
Exactly.
So that's a good reminder.
I completely agree with you. I think far too many people worry about what I consider non-problems.
Sure.
I mean, there are real problems, like I don't have enough food, there's a lion about to eat me, things like that I would consider like actual problems.
Sure. Yeah.
Like you forgot to record something, or even if you forgot to like pay a water or power bill, like those are pretty like easily solvable problems. So like all the things that seem like, horrifyingly bad, like really they're not like that big of problems when you get right down to it. So I think just there's like a general fragility because we don't really have the struggle, once again, like you were talking about before. So this same kind of like fragility bleeds over into essentially everything. So now we're like a bunch of glass eggs that just get broken by almost any offhanded comment or whatever. It's just it's like a softness that in a negative way. Like I don't think you'd be like a tough guy and like talk macho all the time, but like
we were made to thrive in nature and survive, and in the harshest conditions. And now our electricity goes out, and take a day off of work because we couldn't do our hair. Not me apparently, but
the hair comment was a weird choice, but okay.
Louis C.K. has this really good sketch. He talks about we're so spoiled now we won't even do our second favorite thing.
Yeah.
Like if somebody offers you
it's great.
a hamburger and it's like, it's not perfectly cooked, it's fine. It's a hamburger. You'll eat it and you'll love it, but the guy going across traffic, well, I have to turn left right there because I can't go up another block, and then
exactly.
It's absolutely hilarious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really funny to see how accustomed we got to extreme luxury so fast.
So fast. Like the stories
So
my
fast.
grandpa used to tell me when I was a kid. I mean, if
Oh
you
yeah.
told that story in a college classroom today, and I don't want to stereotype millennials because it's really popular to do, but dude, they would all cry. 100% of the class would be in tears from the stuff my
Yeah.
grandpa just did as a kid because if he didn't, he would starve. Like
Right.
normal stuff. And that's one of the things I come up against a lot is people who like, oh, well, I don't like to exercise. Well, yeah, you do.
Right.
You know, go back into your lizard brain thing. There's something that your body wants to do that you're going to find stimulating enough to keep you interested long enough that it's going to become an effective program for you. But you have to like
Right.
stop sitting around thinking about how it might feel and just go do stuff until you find the thing.
Yeah, no
Absolutely.
doubt.
Well, I could never do CrossFit. Or I do. My favorite thing to do is stuff that people think is miserable, right? So endurance racing and CrossFit, people look at it and go, "Oh, it's terrible. I could never do that." Well, how do you know?
Right,
Go
exactly.
go do it and find out if you can do it. And just sit
Well,
there and tell me you can't.
and I think it's like a defensive mechanism too. Because like if someone has that attitude about any physical activity, it means they've already kind of precluded themselves from even
Sure.
sampling it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh no, I'm allergic to exercise. No, thank you. Yeah. You know, like
And you see it with nutrition and everything too. You know, oh, I can't eat anything green, and you see people all the time. Oh, I've never had it, but I hate it.
it's possible to exist and survive and act like a child now. That's really what it's come down
Yeah.
to. Is like you
Sure.
can act like a complete child and you will still be able to survive in this world.
Yeah.
Like that's how good things are. So
That's
if you
right.
give someone the opportunity to do that, like of course they're going to do it. Except they're going to act like a child who doesn't like move around like a child actually. So it's like kind of the worst.
They'd be better off as an actual child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess if anyone's listening and they kind of feel that they're in that camp of people that, you know, kind of just says, oh, that's like too hard, that's too this, that's too that, I would consider like, you know, taking a long, hard look and see like, you know, let's make a run, like make an honest effort at getting that physical freedom back and see what your body's capable of. Like it's really a shame to never test it at least a little bit. Like even if you just you know, learned how to stand up paddleboard. And I use that example because it's relatively low impact and safe. So, I mean, anyone can pretty much try it as long as you wear a life vest and aren't, like, freaked out about the water. But, you know, just go try stuff, I guess is what I would say, instead of, like, you know, worrying about what crazy other people are doing, you know? Because I'm sure a lot of people would consider what all of us do crazy.
Yeah. Well,
on some level.
And I think that's a limitation to some degree. There's a perception that people who think like we all seem to are fitness freaks, or we're you know crazy, one of those health freaks, or you know, just crazy in some way, shape, or form. So that sometimes I feel like my message isn't received well because people look at me as he's the guy that doesn't have any chips in his house.
Yeah,
so
he never has any.
He's crazy.
He doesn't even like sugar. He only likes to bench press and do sprints all day. That's what he does for fun.
Yeah.
Like movies,
he just
like
loves. Exactly.
He's just in the gym lifting all day. He just loves lifting so much. He's a personal trainer. What do you do? Like lift for 8 hours a day? No. Like, of course, the irony is anyone who is a personal trainer knows like the last fucking thing you want to do after training 8 people is to train yourself. You're like, I don't want to look at any more weights right now.
Sure.
Right.
So it's so
and when
funny.
I have ice cream, it's delicious, just like it is for you. It's wonderful.
Exactly. Just as good.
Maybe better.
It is really funny though, like because I've definitely experienced that too. People kind of play it off like, oh well, it's easy for you to say you're the fitness guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I guess I'm a fitness guy, but at the same time, like. Living the other way is just really not that cool. Like it's really just not that fun to not be able to do stuff. And I mean, the only thing I can really compare it to, because I've been generally active my whole life, is that there have been times where I've gotten injured, and that's like just psychologically so brutal.
Yeah.
Where you go from being able to like have physical autonomy. I mean, I went at one point I went from being able to, do deadlifts and backflips and sprint and do any kind of sport and jiu-jitsu and all that to bedridden for a week. And that sharp contrast tells you really quick how nice it is to be able to have full control over your body.
Yeah.
Like if you experience like a pain like that, like, wow, this is actually really cool that I'm able to just do all this stuff normally.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't even realize how far their physical capacity has gone down until they're faced with some positive struggles. Something like, oh, I'm gonna try to deadlift 225, or I'm gonna try to hang on a bar for 1 full minute, or I'm gonna try to hang from a bar for 1 arm, or I'm gonna try to crawl for a full minute. And you're just like, oh my God, how can I not do these things? And you're like, well, you've been sitting for like 15 years. That's why,
Sure.
I get people all the time who are very surprised. They're like, wow, I thought I did feel good, but I didn't even know how good I could feel until I actually started moving everything around. Like, you kind of just get used to whatever condition your body's in. Like, you just, you get used to it.
It's the norm now.
So then when you're like, oh my God, like, wait, shoulders are supposed to go behind you sometimes? It's crazy.
Yeah.
My shoulders used to be terrible. I mean, and that's actually, it's funny, but writing the book, Simple Shoulder Solution, actually helped me fix my shoulders. And it was the result of having to fix my shoulders, because a lot of the information out there was very centered on just like, oh, if it hurts here, do this thing right here. But it really matters that you have the entire body functioning well, because it's very common for a core problem or an opposite hip problem or even an ankle problem or a neck problem to be actually causing the shoulder issue.
Yeah.
So people, until you really adopt a philosophy of training your whole body and conditioning the tissues, muscle, tendon, ligament, bone, over the long term, you don't really have a chance to see how good you can feel, because you don't know you don't know if there are potential dysfunctions, and you certainly don't know the source of them, which is why you have to take like that holistic full body approach to figure out what's going to work the best for that person.
Yeah, no doubt.
Basically, I try to look for the intersection of optimal and fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like the optimal workout is probably going to be, some flexibility to it, but it's going to be pretty regimented to make sure you like hit a certain number of patterns, a certain number of days in a certain week. Cycling the loads from heavy to light, the reps from low to high, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have something that's that regimented, it's going to be really like small percentage of the population, I should say, that actually finds that really enjoyable to do that to a T.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find somewhere where you fall on that sweet spot where it's like, wow, this is really fun and interesting, and I'm also getting kick-ass results.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I think that's another like magic bullet, I guess, to figuring out how to approach the whole fitness dilemma.
Yeah, I like that. I think that would be very, very useful advice for a lot of people in their programming. All right, let's jump to you can read only one book. What is it and why?
Oh, man. Probably just because it's on like the top of my awareness still, because I read it recently. It's a book called Sapiens.
That's on my list. Yeah, I've been wanting to get to that. It's
a great book. I don't necessarily agree with all of his like predictions toward the end of the book, but I think especially the audio book is extremely informative. It's called Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Harari, and I think it just does a great job kind of laying out everything that's taken Homo sapiens from where they started to where we are now. And I think it's just a really fun reminder, because some things you kind of just inherently think are great, but in the grand scheme of things, it was actually a step sideways or a step backwards, and there were all these different things that caused us to currently behave the way we do. And I think having a good understanding of history, at least on some level, is really important to help you make better decisions. And that's another thing that 19-year-old Max didn't really understand, is that history was important. I was like, well, it's old news. Like, what's the big deal? Well, history is the way that you can make informed decisions about the future, is you can watch what has happened and use that to help you in the future. So I think that one's great.
Gives you context to understand the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. You have only one lesson you can impart on the next generation. All will adhere 100% to this advice. They will absolutely ignore any subsequent suggestions or advice. What lesson do you communicate?
Oh my goodness.
I guess Max. The whole world's depending on you.
Yeah, you are the dictator.
Kind of a lot of pressure to put on me. You could look at this one of two ways. I think the best things a person can do are to just move, breathe, and live your life, honestly. And what I mean by that is, I think that if you make like conscious breathing and movement a part of your life, that'll be really beneficial. And if you just kind of live and let live, I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to be a little bit happier and a positive influence in people around you. I think people are too concerned with what everybody else is doing when it doesn't really affect or bother them.
Sure.
Certainly doesn't concern anybody.
That's the should thing again, right?
Yeah, it's the should. That's why, like, I really don't care what you do. Like, I mean, short of like robbing me and punching me in the face, like, you do whatever you want. Like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the best thing. And if we all just would treat each other better, that would be great.
Be kind and don't take things too personally.
Well, you can't take anything personally, because you got to believe that everyone is always doing what they think is the best option at any given time.
Sure.
That just might not intersect with what you think is the best option at any given time. So, you know, unless it's like really affecting you in a profoundly negative way and there's something you can do about it, then do something about it. But complaining about it does absolutely nothing. So,
yeah,
you know, fix what you can, but don't worry about what you can't change.
Move, breathe, and live mindfully, it sounds like.
There you go.
Just go with it.
Being a very unusual dictator.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly, right?
I'm going to take over the world and then tell everybody to just go do their thing.
Now, to be fair, advice is very different than laws.
Ah, true. Okay.
You know, like, you know, and I think, you know, as dictator, well, did I win the election for dictator?
I elected
dictator now.
Yeah.
Okay,
well, not that there's an election for a dictator typically.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I think that'd be more of like a military coup kind of guy than like a slowly subverting the government.
Yeah.
I think a society is driven by culture and consequences. So as dictator, I think you need to have good, swift consequences in place for behavior that you don't like, and you need to have a culture that all values the same things, essentially. So if everybody thought that being nice to people and moving your body was important, that would, you know, shape our society. If you know, any violent crime was immediately punishable by death, that would really form the society too. You know, there are a lot of different things, and it just goes to show, like, you know, how our decision-making process is very affected by just the standard classical conditioning.
Yeah, no doubt.
How do we move that cultural conversation? One of the things that I'm always scratching my head about is how do we change people's mindset about how they take care of themselves? I mean, your thing is live mindfully, move around a lot, you know, eat. So how do we change that conversation from exercise is punishment and food is a sin and all of those things we've been talking about?
I think the first thing you do is you just set a good example. That's because I think, you know, we are all going to be limited by our capabilities of essentially marketing, by how broad our message will be received. So if at the very least you just set a good example for the people around you, like one of the things I always do is I always take a video of me doing mobility drills when I'm at the airport, doing it in a public place, just to say, like, hey, you know, I know that we're probably all conditioned to think, like, oh, look at this weird dude moving around, which is one of the most ridiculous sentences I can even imagine. Look at this weird dude moving around.
Why
like,
is
look
he
at him.
fitting?
What a moron. Why isn't he sitting down like the rest of us?
Why isn't he staring into his phone?
Yeah,
Good morning,
exactly.
damn you.
So, and
His posture's good.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, what's up with his nice posture and, neck being vertical.
Dick.
So I think setting a good example and just kind of normalizing it is the most important thing. So if you just set a good example and put that out there, then some people like yourselves will decide that that's probably a good idea and maybe jump on board, and that's how a movement gets started. Really, is it just you get enough people to, it's a good enough idea that enough people buy in and start to actually practice that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know a lot of people who do understand that mobility training is a good idea, but also wouldn't do it in a public place.
Sure.
So it kind of works both ways.
To me, the idea of actually changing culture, eventually I think it has to somehow get to schools, because I think that's the greatest cultural nucleus. The rooting PE out of schools, the rooting recess out of schools. As you were talking about, I think before we started recording, play, movement, these things, they have huge payoff. They get to our reptilian brain, and they allow us to think better. And when we don't honor that natural inclination, we see massive epidemic poor health, along with anxiety and a host of other issues. So
absolutely. It's interesting too, because we didn't really start to separate the mind from the body until like the 1500s, or at least the 15th century. And then we started treating them as two like very separate things. But I think it's more effective and certainly useful to treat them as part of like a feedback loop throughout your whole body. There's a lot of research that would suggest that your gut actually is responsible for a lot of your cognitive process too, and it's in response to a lot of the things going on with your gut. So there's this like brain-gut relationship, just the same way there's this brain-body relationship or body-gut relationship. And I think just understanding that it either all works or none of it works. If you have a sick mind, it is going to poison your body, and if you have something wrong with your body, it's going to poison your mind just the same way. So it's this constant relationship between, if you want to separate in the brain and body, or you can just say like, doing stuff that stimulates your brain in a, creative way, or like a conceptual way versus in a physical way.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll jump to this is the last one. I think it'll segue very well. If you could create one rite of passage for all our society, what would it be? Dictator Max.
I would probably want to get real creative with something like this. I certainly, rite of passage. I mean, there would have to be some sort of physically challenging task. Maybe some kind of like, as long as I'm wishing here, probably they're going to have to do some sort of like wilderness traversing, and then keep a journal of what they see for like a year. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maybe in the process, like learn how to, catch your own food and cook your own food and things like that. Now, and this is going to make me sound like so old school, because most of this is like completely useless skills the way that we currently live. But I think it does teach you a lot about yourself, when you're in those challenging situations. I think it's very obvious that a lot of the countries who have mandatory military service have a more capable population. Simple as that. Like, how could any period of high discipline and learning new skills not benefit you in some way, right?
Yeah. So absolutely.
I think there are really a lot of ways you can go. I think getting up to like an acceptable level of basic physical strength and fitness, almost like a military PFT, working up to that alongside some sort of cognitive growth. And I think being able to write stuff down would be probably pretty beneficial.
Actually forcing the reflection.
Yeah, exactly.
Something that kind of combines all those things you were just talking about.
Right.
But again, we're going to how we change, the community and the way that movement is viewed in the community. Well,
Hmm.
common experience would be crucial to that, I would think.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Creates
I
that.
think that's a really great way to phrase it too, because that's really what allows us to cooperate in large groups. Is we have to all believe in something unifying, which
Yes.
early on was like some form of religion. Actually, that was like the only
Yeah.
way we could get cooperative in groups over 150. Like over 150, it's like even like if you're the strongest, most badass fighter dude ever, if you're trying to rule over 150 people, 15 or 20 of them can still just kick your ass and like take the throne. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if there's like
Exactly.
this mystic entity that
Sure.
chose you to lead them, and now you all believe in the tree spirit or the river spirit, which were like the first kind of things they believed in,
Uh-huh.
it was a lot easier to get everybody to be on board with like, okay, hey everybody, just so we're clear, we like the river spirit, but that tree spirit over there, fuck that guy. We don't like anybody who likes the tree spirit. We don't like the tree spirit. We're the river spirit group. So we're going to do everything we can to help out our river spirit friends. And then they get like a bigger group and they're able to do more
Uh-huh.
cool stuff. And then that's how that worked.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. The
That's
dogma
got to
has
be
been.
related to handstand somehow, right?
There's something about a chemical swing with the river people, and then yeah.
Yeah.
You should teach history because that was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah.
That would get those kids awake right there.
Right. Exactly. Well, delivery is a little bit different, I guess.
No, that was very well done though, actually. But it's an interesting thing. Dogma has been such a horrible thing for people in many ways. It kind of gets them trapped, stifles their creativity. And yet, some sort of common ethos, I think, is vital for a thriving community. Some sense of common good. So I think there's a proper balance, like with most things.
It's a fine line. You
It's
don't
not a paradox,
necessarily.
it's a
Yeah.
nuance, I think.
Yeah. You don't necessarily want like blind faith,
No,
but you also need everybody to like generally believe in the same thing and value. Really comes down to
values.
values. Like, what do you value?
Exactly.
What do you value the most? And that definitely, like you said, like dictates where a society goes. Like, what does everybody value?
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's a real good way to end. What are the common values that are going to unify the greatest people ever?
Oh my goodness. I think the main thing is number one, don't be a burden, and number
Love that.
two, help everyone else out around you after that. So like step one is just don't become a burden, and then step two is
Movement
like
can help.
once you're not a burden, then you go help other people with their thing, and then I think that would work really well.
I think that's beautiful. Don't be a burden, and then help others once you're not a burden.
Exactly. And I guess the same thing can be said physically, I mean, I actually
Yeah.
remember I saw, it was really sad, actually. It made me sad. I was at the airport and I saw this family running to make their flight, and the mom couldn't run anymore. Like she had to stop. So I'm assuming they probably missed their flight because running was necessary. So everybody had to stop because she couldn't make it. And I'm sure she felt awful also. But I think physically you can say the same thing. Like, how can you help anybody else if you're like physically wrecked? So I think
Yeah.
you have a responsibility to yourself to not have a defeated victim mentality and to be like, you know what, there are things that I can do. Don't
Yeah.
focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can. I work with a guy right now who is over 80 years old, and his body's the result of 70 years of inactivity. Like he really doesn't move well at all. But I see him twice a week, and he does everything that he can. And we, there's stuff that he
Sure.
can't do, so you just don't do it. But if you focus on what you can't do, and if you focus on the injuries or the pains or the excuses or whatever,
Yeah.
and act like a victim, that just doesn't get you anywhere. So I
Certainly.
think the most important thing is just focus on what you can do, and then expand what you can do outward. And that's kind of like the ultimate athleticism way anyway, is that if you expand your capacity, then you have this like cornucopia of options.
Yeah.
So you can do fun things forever. I mean, I promise you, there are a lot of really fun things you can do in this world. that are physically active. You
Yeah.
don't need to burn any calories. There are so many things that are fun, and you'll also utilize calories. Why would you do something that's just punishment? Give yourself that, give yourself that physical freedom so that you can go out and have like a fun, active life. I think that's the real secret, not like, counting calories or figuring out how many you can burn or how much time you can kill.
What is really sad is to see people 40 years old, and they'll watch their kids play, and they'll say, "Oh, I remember, I used to love playing that." And it's almost as if there's no way they could anymore. That was a whole lifetime ago, and it's over. They don't get to play anymore.
And it hits different people at different ages.
Yeah.
It hits different people at different ages, too. I mean, you get some people in their freaking 30s who are just like, I'm just not as good as I was when I was 25. Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, you're also not 25 anymore, so like, congratulations for that. But does that mean you just like roll over and die? Of course, no one promised you fair or even good. Like, you just play the cards you're dealt. Like,
That's exactly right. And again, to go back to something else we've talked, you've probably got it pretty dang good. If you look at the scope of everything.
I mean, if you're listening to this, you have it great. Like, let's be honest. Anybody who can listen to any podcast is killing it historically.
That's right.
It's really, you're having a great time. You're probably listening to this on a phone. Maybe you even have a computer. Perhaps you're in a car while you're listening to this that you own. I mean, like,
I'm going to add that to my list of irrefutable truths. Like, if you have a favorite TV show, then you have time to work out. That's the end of the argument.
Bottom line,
If you can listen to a podcast, your life is not that bad. So just
fantastic.
Yeah, sure.
If you can use the internet, like, I mean, you're a wizard, historically speaking. Like, you really are. Like, you can figure out any answer to anything that's ever been asked.
Yeah.
Because we've cataloged it so well. Like, that's why when you ask me, like, what's the greatest invention? Well, it's obviously, like, the cell phone and the web, and, like, just connecting all that stuff together. Just the same way I'm not training 8 hours a day. Like, I look at my cell phone too. Like, I'm still just a dumb monkey like the rest of us. Like, I'm still susceptible to it. I'm just slightly more aware, slightly more often. I mean, if you just move around, life is better. Simple as that.
I love it. Just move around and life is better. That's
it.
That's this conversation in a nutshell. Well, Max, thanks so much. It's been awesome. Truly, just to get to sit down and talk with you is I'm so fortunate. I've read your stuff forever, looked up to you, just enjoyed the hell out of it. So this has been a treat for me. I really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, man. Well, I appreciate you organizing this whole thing. It's been a hell of a great conversation. I would love to do it again. It's been awesome.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we can set that up. That would be awesome. Thanks so much, and you have a great day. Let us know if we can ever do anything.
You guys too. Thanks, guys. Take care.